Okay, so are you ready to take a deep dive with me today?
Always.
Awesome. Today we're going to dig into Gina Rinehart, this Australian mining magnate who some say is brilliant and others call, well, a master manipulator. We've got a ton of sources here.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting mix.
Wikipedia articles about some controversies she's been involved in, and even some stuff about the Streisand effect, which it seems like she just can't shake.
Yeah, she seems to be a bit of a magnet for that, doesn't she?
So we're going to try to figure out if she's really gifted or just a grifter.
Ah, I love that.
Right? It's a good one.
Yeah, I mean, her life story is like the perfect example of today's theme,
Oh, how so?
where charisma and controversy collide. It's that gray area that makes her so fascinating. You know, that space where it's really hard to tell where genuine vision ends and self-interest begins.
Yeah, it's going to be fun to try to unpack that. So to try and, make sense of it all, let's start at the beginning. You highlighted that Reinhardt was basically born into the mining world, right? Her father, Lang Hancock, was a huge figure in the industry.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Lang Hancock discovered the world's largest iron ore deposits in Western Australia back in the 1950s. So for Jana, inheriting that legacy, it's kind of like being handed the keys to a kingdom.
Oh, wow.
But a kingdom with some pretty heavy
Yeah,
baggage.
I was going to say, like on the one hand, you've got this huge head start, resources, connections, a name everyone knows that opens doors. But on the other hand, you're always going to be compared to what your father accomplished. It's a lot of pressure.
Oh, tons.
Do you think that kind of pressure might push someone to make, well, let's just say unconventional choices?
It's definitely something to think about. When you look at some of the things Reinhardt has done, like demanding the removal of her portrait from Australia's National Gallery.
Wait, what?
Yeah, she didn't like how it looked. And it makes you wonder about her motivations. Is this a powerful woman protecting her image? Or is there something more going on?
Hmm, that's a good point. And it reminds me of something else you mentioned, this whole Streisand effect thing. I have to admit, I hadn't really thought about it in relation to her before, but it actually makes a lot of sense.
It totally does. The Streisand effect basically says that trying to suppress information often backfires and actually makes it even more well known. And Reinhardt is like the perfect example of this. Think about it. If she hadn't made a fuss about that portrait, would we even be talking about it right now?
Probably not.
Right.
So the controversy itself brought more attention to the things she was trying to hide. That's pretty ironic.
Totally.
And you mentioned this has happened with her before too, right? Something about legal battles and media injunctions.
Yeah, there were a few attempts to use legal means to suppress information about family disputes and stuff.
Mhm.
And just like with the portrait, those attempts totally backfired, creating even more press coverage.
Wow, she really can't escape controversy, can she?
It seems not.
But you also pointed out that controversies aside, she's undeniably successful. She took over Hancock Prospecting after her father died and turned it into this massive mining empire.
Yeah, she's a force to be reckoned with, for sure. Her business smarts are undeniable. She's not just coasting on her father's legacy, she's expanding it.
How so?
Well, she's moved beyond just iron ore. She's investing in agriculture, securing these huge export partnerships with China, even getting involved in the media. It's a very strategic approach and honestly, pretty impressive.
Okay, so she's not just good at making money. It sounds like she's got this bigger vision. Maybe she actually believes she's making a positive impact on the world.
It's a good question. I mean, we see her using the latest technology,
Mm-hmm.
pushing for efficiency in her operations, and taking calculated risks. It's not just about holding on to the old ways of doing things. She seems to actually want to innovate.
Oh.
But then we have to ask, what's the end goal? Is it simply profit? Or is there something more altruistic at play?
And speaking of altruism, we can't ignore the whole philanthropy angle.
Yeah.
You included some info about her donations to different causes. Everything from the Royal Flying Doctor Service to Australia's Olympic swimming team.
Right.
That's a pretty diverse portfolio.
It is. And it's interesting because philanthropy can be such a powerful tool. It can really make a difference in the world. But it can also be a way to shape how the public sees you.
Right.
So are her donations coming from a genuine desire to give back? Or is there an element of reputation management involved? I think it's something worth keeping in mind as we go deeper into her story.
Definitely a good question to keep in mind. So far, we've seen Gina Rinehart as this really complex figure, a shrewd businesswoman, a magnet for controversy, and a philanthropist. It's almost like she's very carefully crafting her image, but the cracks keep showing through.
Exactly. And to really figure out this grifter gifted question, we need to examine those cracks closely. Are they just a byproduct of her ambition, or are they a sign of something more concerning?
This is going to be
Or
interesting.
buckle up.
All right, let's take a quick break and then we'll dive back in.
Okay, so let's talk more about Reinhardt shaping her public image. You sent over this article about her business dealings, specifically her ventures beyond iron ore. Moving into things like agriculture and media seems pretty strategic, don't you think?
Yeah, it definitely does. It's like she's not content with just running the family business. She wants to find new opportunities, new ways to increase her wealth and influence. But is that necessarily a bad thing? Isn't that what any successful entrepreneur would do?
Well, that's where things get a little tricky. We have to look at the context, the why behind her actions. For instance, you highlighted her partnership with Chinese companies for exports. On the surface, it seems like a smart business decision.
Right.
China has a huge demand for resources, so it makes sense to tap into that market.
Yeah.
But it also raises some questions about her motivations.
Like what?
Well, is she really trying to build bridges and foster positive international relations? Or is it just about maximizing profits? Even if it means aligning herself with a government that doesn't have the best human rights record.
That's a good point. It's like, is she genuinely trying to do good?
Yeah.
Or is it just about the bottom line?
Exactly. It's about looking beyond the surface and
Yeah.
asking those tough questions. And this applies to her love of innovation, too. You mentioned her using drones to monitor mining sites and data management systems to make production more efficient, and that focus on environmentally friendly extraction techniques. All of that sounds great in theory.
Oh, yeah, totally. It makes her look like a forward-thinking leader, someone who's adapting to the times, embracing sustainability.
Right. But could it also be a calculated move to try to appeal to a more environmentally conscious customer base?
That's possible.
It's like greenwashing, where companies try to make themselves look more eco-friendly than they actually are to boost their image and appeal to consumers.
Yeah.
So is Reinhardt really committed to these sustainable practices, or is it just another part of her carefully constructed public image?
It's hard to say for sure. I'm starting to think nothing is simple with this woman.
Haha, yeah, she's a bit of an enigma.
And speaking of complicated, we have to talk about her controversial views. You included quite a bit about her stance on economic policies, especially her support for lower wages and less taxes on mining. It seems like she's not afraid to make people angry.
Yeah, ruffle some feathers is putting it mildly. Her comments about Australians needing to stop whinging and work harder if they want to be successful, along with comparing Australian wages to those in Africa, well, those comments create a huge backlash.
Oh, you can see why.
Yeah, I mean, for someone who inherited a mining fortune and has never had to worry about money, it comes across as pretty insensitive, right?
Totally. It's like she's living on a different planet from most Australians.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you also mentioned that some people actually find her message appealing. This idea of personal responsibility and hard work.
Right. That's the interesting thing about Gina Rinehart. She's a very polarizing figure. People either love her or hate her. Some people admire her business savvy. And the fact that she's not afraid to speak her mind, even if it's unpopular, while others see her as a symbol of everything that's wrong with capitalism, like an out-of-touch elite.
So it's really hard to say if she's a grifter or gifted.
It seems like she's a mix of both.
Yeah, which makes her really hard to figure out.
Definitely.
And then there's all the drama with her family. The legal battles with her children over control of the family trust. And those accusations of financial mismanagement. All of that's been plastered all over the media.
It hasn't exactly helped her public image.
No, not really.
It makes you think, if she can't even get along with her own family, how can she be trusted to run a company, let alone be a voice for social or economic change?
Good point. And it's interesting how even those legal battles seem to tie back into this whole Streisand effect.
Yeah.
Like you said before, trying to keep things quiet often just makes them louder.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like every time she tries to control the story, it just blows up in her face.
Maybe she's just so used to getting her own way that she can't imagine things not going according to plan.
Maybe. Or maybe she just doesn't understand how much power public perception has. It doesn't matter how much money or influence you have. If people don't trust you, it can all disappear very quickly.
That's a good point. So back to our big question. Grifter or gifted? Is she really trying to make a positive impact on the world? Or is it all just an act to benefit herself?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
We've seen both sides of Gina Rinehart today. The brilliant businesswoman, the controversial figure, and even some hints of philanthropy. It's like she's this puzzle where the pieces don't quite fit.
Yeah, it's a good analogy.
But you know me. I love a good challenge. Let's keep digging and see if we can find the missing pieces. You're going through all this stuff on Gina Rinehart. This idea of legacy keeps coming up. She's always being compared to her father, Lang Hancock. Makes you wonder how much of what she does is about trying to live up to his reputation, or even trying to be better than him.
It's a great point. Lang Hancock's legacy definitely hangs over her. He was a pioneer in mining, but also a very controversial figure. Some people thought he was a visionary. Others thought he was just exploiting resources. And Gina seems to have inherited both sides of that, his ambition and his talent for stirring up controversy.
So she's trying to honor her father's legacy,
Mm.
but also make her own mark. And those two things don't always go together,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to her views on social and political stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Like, take her belief in hard work and individual responsibility. She's always criticizing what she calls socialist policies, arguing for less government and lower taxes.
Right, and it's not just talk. You sent me an article about a speech she gave, where she actually said Australians should stop whinging and work harder if they want to be successful. She even compared Australian wages to those in Africa, basically saying Australians are spoiled.
Those comments didn't go over well.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I mean, it came across as pretty out of touch, coming from someone who inherited a fortune and has never had to struggle financially.
Totally. It's like she doesn't even understand what it's like for most Australians.
Right.
But then again, you mentioned that some people agree with her about personal responsibility and hard work.
Yeah, she's got her supporters. It's what makes Gina Rinehart so interesting. She's polarizing. People have very strong opinions about her. Either they admire her for her business skills and her outspokenness, or they see her as a symbol of unchecked capitalism, part of an out-of-touch elite.
So are we any closer to figuring out if she's a grifter or gifted?
It really seems like she's a bit of both.
Yeah, a real mix of good and bad.
Which makes her hard to define.
Well, I think we've done a pretty good job of unpacking Gina Rinehart.
We've covered a lot.
We've looked at her business, her controversies, her philanthropy, and that complicated relationship with her father. She's definitely a master at promoting herself, a savvy businesswoman, and someone who likes to shake things up.
She's not afraid to challenge the status quo, that's for sure.
And whether you like her or not,
Mhm.
there's no denying she's made a big impact.
No doubt about that. And that's what makes this whole question of grifter or gifted so interesting. It makes us think about what success really means, what drives people to achieve great things, and what they might sacrifice along the way.
Some really important things to think about.
Absolutely.
Well, that wraps up our deep dive into Gina Rinehart. Thanks for joining me.
Anytime.
And thanks to everyone listening. We'll be back soon with another deep dive into a fascinating figure. Until then, keep those critical thinking caps on. And be sure to check out our show notes for more information.